Hello, this is Paul Chek. Welcome back to my series on mind-body connection. Today we're doing part 3, Archetypes and You. Very, very important concept. Just to lay the groundwork here, Carl Jung was the first person to really describe archetypes in the professional literature, whether it be psychiatry, psychology, or other fields. His work is extremely in-depth and requires a lot of background training to understand and can easily confuse people. So if you have the background training in psychological sciences and related fields, such as symbology, metaphysics, art interpretation, science, and many others, then Carl Jung's your best place to go. Those of you that want to understand this more quickly and more easily would find yourself greatly rewarded by looking into the works of Joseph Campbell, such as his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and many others. The archetype concept is really something that Jung identified to be present in all cultures worldwide. So an example of an archetype is the mother, the father, and the child. So the archetypal concept of the mother and the father and the child shows up in every single culture that's ever lived on this planet. Anybody that's ever been investigated by archaeologists, as does the warrior, for example, as does the prostitute, and many others. So what these are is ideas, and this goes back to Plato's ideas of forms and pure ideas. These are concepts or structures. I would refer to them as energetic structures within which any one of us at any given time has the potential to reach self-realization. Any path that you take can be a road to self-realization, and I mean any path. Anybody that says different is, I would say, yet uneducated. You can go any way. You can go down through the dungeon, be a murderer, a rapist, and all that, and find God. And look how many people in prison find God when they have time to reflect on themselves. So these are very, very important concepts. But what I want to point here is that these concepts Jung showed, as Joseph Campbell iterated, that they live in the unconscious. Your soul represents consciousness within a body. Wherever there's an inside and an outside, and something that can regulate its inner state relative to its outer state, you have a soul. Consciousness is ubiquitous, it's non-local, so it's everywhere. I have an inside and an outside, which means I have a soul that's conscious of what's occurring inside of me, and where there's a soul, there's an individual mind, if you will, because you can't make changes with your inner state relative to your outer state without a mind. So the mind, you could say, is a choice machine, a choice function. So to reiterate then, these are ideals that are present, as I'll show you, in the unconscious, and these ideals are common to all human beings, and they are projected from our unconscious into our psyches and act upon others, and others act upon us. So now I'm going to take you through an explanation of the model I've developed to help you better orient yourself to the importance of archetypes in your life and how amazing the realization can be when you get the concept. Personally, I'd like to state, I've studied this stuff for a number of years. I started studying Joseph Campbell's stuff probably in the late 80s. And continued to revisit it and revisit it and revisit it. And I've had to go through his programs many, many times, his books many times, and every time I go through, I learn more and learn more and learn more. Because when you're dealing with a Joseph Campbell or a Carl Jung, you're dealing with a wise man. And you're dealing with someone who can say one sentence that can stop your mind and throw you into a meditative state for a year. So, hallelujah. Okay, so let's revisit. We have covered unconditional love. We've talked about what I feel love is from my own explorations and experiences. I've explained the Holy Trinity as the circuit of potentiality becoming actuality, or potential becoming existence, as this or that. I shared my model of the cup, so I talked about functionality and utility, and my emphasis was that everything in the created universe is a marriage of yin and yang. I had to divide yin and yang and give them qualities to help people understand them, but I'll reiterate that these two never act independently of each other. And if you look at the works of Victor Schauberger, he says if the quality of yin or yang ever exceeds 96% relative to the other, then it ceases to exist, and all existence itself would cease to exist. There's a relationship between these two circles and the functionality and capacity of these. That represents yang. If that grows because you're overworking, overeating, overstressing, that shrinks yin. Think of that as water, think of that as fire. The more fire you get, the less water you have, and the less water you have, the less soup you can make, the less you can produce with it. So someone who's overly yang shrinks yin until there's a crisis of potential energy or self-expression, which leads them into some sort of awareness exercise. I'm here to share with you that the archetypes are your potential. They represent your potential to reach enlightenment or self-realization, and these two forces are acting through everything, including your psyche, as I'll show you when we get over here. And so now we're at love as our potential as an individual. Today we'll go through archetypes, which relates to core values, and then our next section will be on myth and experience, and that may bring us close to the end. So here we see I've redone a model for you to explain archetypes. Here's unconditional love, a dotted circle. Here's the Tai Chi symbol, in which I've placed the Om symbol, which means the totality of vibration, or in biblical terms means logos, all caps, which means the Word of God. Stuff that in your hat, call it macaroni if you want to, but remember, for me, when I say the Word of God, I mean the potential of zero to become no thing and simultaneously everything, and spirit is the vacillation between those two realities, which any scientist of any capability can tell you is going on constantly. Basic science tells you that. Okay? Zero, when you get the Tai Chi symbol, you now have potential becoming life force. Tai Chi means something's happening. So the universe itself is Tai Chi. Wu Chi is where it came from. Wu Chi means that which is prior to, or not necessarily prior to, but that which is not that. Okay? Potential itself is not the world or the universe. Just like the potential in your battery on your phone is not the phone call and is not the phone, but somehow empowers the phone to be a phone so you can make a phone call. So the clear distinction is this is energetic potential to create, but is yet uncreated. This is the manifest world as it is, and includes all things knowable, including thought. So here we have life force as expressed potential. In balance, when we're in balance and we're feeling with our heart, we have the capacity. The heart is the center of energy that integrates the lower self, or the animal self, the biological self, with what might be referred to as the angelic self, or the higher consciousness. So the heart is between the creative self-expression of the 5th chakra, the imagination of the 6th, and the intuition of the 7th. So you see the heart integrates what would largely be considered information and energy with the base survival drives of the biological self, which can be referred to in some states as the subconscious mind, which is really what feeds off your DNA. And the subconscious mind, as I use it, is biological relative to the unconscious mind, which is individual and collective, as I will show you. So now we have archetypes. I've written down the key ones that we all interact with, and you can have many archetypes. You can find out what your archetypes are by doing surveys. There's lots of ways. You can look at the work of Carolyn Myson, and she has lots of ways to help you find that. Or you can just pay attention to what's going on and say, what's interesting to me? What am I working for? And that really tells you. You can have an archetype for so many things. For example, the archetype of the mother includes every variation on the theme of a mother, from the drug addict in the ditch who doesn't even pay attention or care about her kids, to the mother that's overly protective, overly loving, and therefore potentially as dysfunctional, but on the opposite end of the scale. So archetypes encapsulate all possibilities within the context of the archetype itself: the mother, the father, the warrior, etc. Okay? Our primary archetypes that we all interact with. If you're here, you're interacting with these. 1, you can't be here without a mother. 2, someone had to get her pregnant. How well a job they're doing as a father is to be determined. You were a child, so I know you're there. And then when we look at Carolyn Myce's, what she calls primary or survival archetypes, we all have to deal with the victim archetype, the saboteur, and the prostitute. We all sell ourselves out for various things. For example, if you're doing a job right now for money, but inside yourself you know you don't like the job and you've convinced yourself you've got to do it, you'll end up over here, as I'll show you in a minute, but you're actually acting out the prostitute because you're giving your love away for money as opposed to following your heart's compass. The saboteur is sabotage. All of us sabotage ourselves in some way at some time, some more than others. And there's maybe a time to sabotage. All of the archetypes have positive and negative attributes. There's a positive attribute to the prostitute. Hey, if you're starving to death and you got to feed yourself, and the only thing you can do is rub feet, but your real dream is to be an artist, it's time to be a prostitute. So there you go. But if you're prostituting yourself to the point that it's stressing you and causing your life to feel like crap, and illnesses and disgruntled behavior, then you're missing the point of the gift of the archetype, and you're still asleep. And the pain teacher comes along to wake you up and say, hey, this isn't how the game is played if you want to enjoy yourself. If you want to play the game poorly, keep it up. And that's just a metaphor. Okay? The victim is also an important archetype because we're all at some points some kind of a victim, whether it's a victim of circumstance, whether it's for example, when I was a kid, I wanted to do a lot of the things that my friends were doing, but my parents didn't have enough money. So I, in my own way, felt victimized. And it can make a child real angry. So there's an example of the victim. A woman who marries a man who thinks that she's getting someone to love her and ends up getting beat up becomes a victim. The question is, when we use the victim archetype, its positive attribute says, now that you've experienced being a victim, are you going to continue to allow it to happen? So the victim, interestingly, in order to heal, may have to take on the warrior archetype, which I'll explain in a little bit, in order to establish harmony within herself and in her environment. If you continue to allow yourself to be a victim, then you're going to be like the person that works for money when they don't want to, or sabotages their own dream for reasons that will probably be largely unconscious, as I will share. So when we look here, the heart, you see my red cross. We all sacrifice ourselves for something. I'm sacrificing right now to make this blog. I don't get paid a dime for this. I do it out of my love for everybody else. Because as a 50-something man, almost 53, it's hard for me to watch all the struggle when so much of it is unnecessary. it brings the empathy and the compassion out of me. I see so many lost young people. I'll never forget the first time I got an email from a 19-year-old athlete who asked me, how do I get off of Viagra? I thought, my God, a 19-year-old man taking Viagra? This is a bad sign. And then I wasn't long later, I got one from a 20 or 22-year-old. And I began to realize that our male culture, and female, but I'm more connected to the males because I am one, is breaking down. And we've got a world full of men that are in their 40s and 50s that are really only about 12 years old. And I have to work with these people all day. I enjoy doing it. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it concerns me because life is where consciousness realizes itself. Life is where the universe sees, experiences, and loves itself. Without the concept of God, just say that the universe only has itself. There's nothing beyond the universe except emptiness. So all things in the universe are oriented towards self. I love me. That means I'm loving the universe. But paradoxically, I'm saying I love me, which means consciousness is loving me. I love you. The consciousness within me is loving the consciousness within you. The universe has nothing but itself to love, and archetypes are opportunities to experience the observation and experience of the rest of yourself. We've come to this dangerous idea that we are somehow separate from the world, therefore we can trash it and it won't matter. We are separate from people of different racial and ethnic beliefs and backgrounds. Christians often cannot conceptually wrap their heads around the fact that Muslims are an expression of themselves. So what do? We start bombing and destroying and raping, pillaging, and genocide, all of which is only a grand display of spiritual ignorance and life ignorance, which makes people that are aware concerned. Okay, so we're all on the cross of life. If we didn't have to sacrifice to achieve something, what would it be worth? Imagine if anyone could be Christina Aguilera or Madonna or Kobe Bryant. Would you be interested at all in their lives? Or would it just be like walking through a shopping mall and noticing everyone has 10 toes and 10 hands and 2 eyes and a mouth? That wouldn't be very fun. It is our unique differences that makes us special. It is our unique difference that makes us interesting to each other. This also represents a compass. And I can tell you, it took me a long time to heal enough of my own pain of these archetypes and the circumstances that I came into, which are perfectly exactly what I needed to be here for you. All the pain of my life has given me real knowledge and experience about what it's like to be abused, what it's like to be prostituted, victimized, all of that. And each one of these painful experiences is like the universe whacking a coconut to say, hey, it's time to come out. We let your juice flow. You know, get a little juicy here. Let it out. Let it out. Don't be so boxed in. You're missing the point. Pain is there to awaken you, and when people repeat the same problems, challenges over and over and over again, well, it's as though the coconut's begging for a bigger hammer. It doesn't need to be that way. Naturally, there's challenges, and this is where we have to sacrifice to grow, but it takes a while to get out of the head, the poor me, I can't believe I didn't do that, oh, I'll never make enough money, I still need mama's titty and I'm 32 or whatever. All of that stuff means that we have pain here that we perceive but stops us from getting into our heart. Many people cannot embody the ideal Jesus shared, which is to love thy neighbor as thyself. Which I guess if we're bombing our neighbors, it means it's a great expression of where we're at in our own personal growth and development as a society or a culture or a world population. Thank God for people like the Dalai Lama who can give us some effective fathering in people like Sister Chan Kung and, some of the great Buddhist teachers, Thich Nhat Hanh, and many others. There's many others out there of many religions. Father Thomas Keating, for God's sakes. Ken Wilber, Deepak Chopra, and then there's an endless list of dead people that have left us tremendous wealth of knowledge. But everybody's too busy watching television. The mob wives. Okay, so we have these potentials. Now, what I'm showing you here is the compass. If we're listening with our heart and our head, we're acting on the available information, we're being rational, we're being logical, but we're also accessing our irrational, illogical feeling state. We often have feelings, we don't understand why we're having them. You can go out for a walk. I can say, let's go walk out the door, and when you see the beautiful vista, the lake, the colors, feelings arise in you. Most people would not necessarily, well, I'm happy because I looked at the flowers, or I'm happy because the sun's out. The whole thing is an experience. So if you come to a place and you have great feelings, the heart is suggesting you come back so you can learn to feel that way more often. That's why I'm here. I want to feel that way every day. Okay, now, each archetype ranges from balance, which means the heart and the head are integrated with the body. The body is part of the heart's part of the body, but metaphysically it's more than that. Okay, so if we take the father archetype, if the father's balanced, then the father is a good father. All of us vacillate between a little too much or a little too little, just like when you drive your car, you don't hold your arms rigid. You're constantly adjusting for the flow of the road, the terrain, and everything like that. So a balanced father or a balanced person in an archetype is staying in the lane of the archetype. In other words, the mother's not getting distracted by going to kickboxing classes and trying to be an ass kicker while her kid's at home hungry for the breast. Okay? So when we look at the father, we could say one extreme would be over-controlling, taking away any sense of autonomy the kids may have, making their choices for them, and putting them in a concrete box, which, by the way, pressurizes the child to the point that, one, the child will seek to master mom and dad's ideas so they can cheat more effectively. Two, it teaches kids to lie because they learn quickly that telling the truth is more dangerous than telling a lie. So over-controlling father or mother is a very problematic thing, and it represents a tremendous insecurity in the mother or the father because they now have to create objects out of their children so that they have a sense of personal power, which is often their own angst from their own childhood being projected onto their children. On the other end of over-controlling, which is highly involved, I have to know this is micromanagement, we have apathetic, which means I don't care. So if you want to know how many apathetic fathers there are, do a survey of how many women got pregnant by men who left them, did not pay alimony payments, and did not care, and you will be probably quite shocked to see how high that number is, percentage-wise, of men that have had sex with women and gotten pregnant, or who become fathers. So there's a tremendous amount of people here, and in every stage in between. But we need more of this if we are, shall we say, going to increase the chances of future generations inhabiting the planet Earth and eating something other than plastic and doing something other than cleaning up rubble from military excursions. Okay? So now that we've got a basic concept on the archetypes, let me take you over here. This is a model that I borrowed from Joseph Campbell, but it's less complex and allows me to share things within a reasonable amount of time. So let's put the model to work. The ego is represented as a box. The square means, in geometry or metaphysical geometry, means that which contains, and it's a symbol of yin, interestingly, the container. The woman is the container for the child. So The ego is that which we perceive of ourself, which is like the tip of an iceberg. The ego is said, based on research, to be about 8% of our conscious state, which means 92% of you is below that line. This represents the personal unconscious, and the personal unconscious is part of the collective unconscious. So here you see collective unconscious, and this stands for family, society, and culture. So your collective unconscious includes the unconscious thoughts and actions of your family, your society, your culture, and then the world. So the collective unconscious includes the world. You could say it even includes the universe, but that now we open the door to alien beings and all that. So we'll keep it to the world. Now, we can only know of ourselves what we dig up from the unconscious and project it. Carl Jung makes it very clear. Joseph Campbell makes it very clear. Lots of people make it very clear. The unconscious is unconscious. By definition, you don't know what's going on down there until you experience it. So Joseph Campbell and others make it very clear that everything that comes out of the unconscious as an experience that you're having, whatever you perceive to be, I want to do this, I want to do that, is usually a projection of your unconscious. The way you see, what constitutes a beautiful woman to you is going to be a projection from your unconscious. What constitutes a man who turns you on if you're a woman is a projection. What constitutes your idea of success, of wealth, of abundance, of God, all of that is projected up out of your unconscious. So here's your 8%, there's your 92%. Now, there's all sorts of books on the dark side of the inner child by Walensky, for example. There's lots of teachings on the shadow. Deepak Chopra has written all sorts of stuff about the shadow, very good stuff too. But one of the things that people don't typically talk about when they talk about the unconscious, they seem to really orient themselves toward the negative of the shadow. We must remember that the shadow is equally balanced with positive attributes. Meditation is an opportunity to explore what's hiding in the basement of the personal unconscious, and to the degree you identify painful, scary, or negative emotions, experiences, and thoughts, it helps you have an opportunity. And this is why, as a therapist, I use art therapy, because many people cannot consciously explain what they're experiencing. For example, someone with post-traumatic stress syndrome has all sorts of very wild and scary inner experiences going on that they cannot reconcile at the ego level because it's being projected up. And the ego at 8% is like a child trying to understand mom and dad as the other 92%. How many kids think they can drive a car better than mom and dad because they played a video game? So my point is, what we perceive up here is largely related to how other people respond to us. If your negative projection turns out to be something that causes other people to not want to interact with you because maybe you're a bully or you're, a challenging person to be with, you could go on for years. You could lose jobs, go through relationship after relationship before you finally have enough ego awareness to realize that you were the primary catalyst in those problems. But a person in that state of unawareness or denial actually tends to blame it on everyone else, which means they're in their victim archetype and possibly saboteur, and maybe even being a prostitute, but blaming it on somebody else. In meditation, in Tai Chi, in shamanic healing and shamanic practices, you can come into direct contact with both of these. And I have. I found stuff in my unconscious that was wild, scary, but once I realized what it was and connected to it and asked my soul to show me what the other side of it is. If you see a negative, you have the tail of the dragon. Keep pulling and you will find out what the positive is. But if you don't pull on the tail of the dragon, you will live your life with one eye closed and only see the negative. All questions are connected to the answer. How big is the universe? Well, keep pulling on that, and you'll get the answer. If you have a cat's tail, pull on it, you'll get to the head. Remember, if you step on a cat's tail, it's the other end that yells. So trying to learn about a cat from its tail alone isn't very smart, because you've got to get to the other end to see a cat in its totality, or you're forever confused, and you may kill all the cats because you don't like tail. Okay? So what we see in this whole setup is something very interesting. Society encases the soul. Society basically creates the structure by which the soul experiences itself. If you're from Peru or deep in Mexico, where you're living in a tribal culture, even to this very moment, your society will create the construct by which your psyche or your soul expresses itself. To give you an example of this, in quantum physics, they repeatedly refer to the double slit experiment. But one of the very wise arguments about over-investing in the double slit experiment is the 0-point field, as I've talked about up here, is pure potential. So if you put two boxes and fire a photon beam at them, you've created the context by which you can only get one of two results. If you had a 200-box experiment, you'd get a different result. Well, what do you do when you got a 6 billion box experiment called humanity? You're going to get all sorts of results. Okay? So the point that I'm making is, we condition consciousness by creating the context within which we observe. Because each of us is different in our archetypes, in our psyche, and in many other factors. As the old saying goes, you can put 12 enlightened people around a round table, in the middle of which is a bouquet of multicolored flowers, and ask each of them to describe what they see, and you will get 12 different answers. But our culture has this weird idea that all enlightened people see the same thing. They see the same principles. They see flowers. But their experience of that flower, and the smell of the flower, and the color of the flower is unique to the individual. And we must remember that the overarching principle of life is wholeness. Division is only a perception to create the experience of something happening. If you saw your whole life in its totality and were experiencing it in its totality, there would be no reason to go to the grocery store, because you'd have already been there and already eaten. That would be vertical time. So once we enter Tai Chi, we have the experience of linear time, which is necessary for experience. So looking at all these things, we see that society, which includes family, society, and culture, creates the context, the two-box experiment, by which we perceive what rises up. For example, if what rises up in you is that you want to have 5 wives and you live in the Middle East, that's an acceptable, normal reaction. But if you come to the United States and people find out you got 5 wives, believe me, because of the cultural box, you will have a completely different experience, and it could be very, very painful for the same reasons we always have clashes. It's idea clashes, really. But any of those clashes is coming from the ego, which forgets that the unconscious rule is we're all the same. We're all mothers, we're all fathers, we're all children, we're all prostitutes, we're all saboteurs, we're all warriors. We all need water, we all need air, we all need food, we all have bodies made of the earth and the stars. So really we have way more in common than we do in difference, but we tend to focus on what we have as a difference in our culture, where in Eastern cultures like India, they function more like ants or animals, where they all are part of a living organism, and the overarching theme is to get rid of the self, the individual self, to participate in the greater collective whole. That was the message of Jesus, paradoxically, but somehow along the way, what happened was children began to interpret the teachings of an adult. This is why Osho says the Abrahamic religions are children's religions, because they're all dependent on a deity that is a controlling father figure, but the adult religions remove that. So in Buddhist, they don't use the term God, they use the term ground of being, etc. I don't have time to go into a long expose on that. Okay, so now we come to something very, very interesting. You have what I'm referring to here is the left-hand path, and then you have the right-hand path. The left-hand path happens when you express your archetypes within the context of your family, society, and culture. In other words, if you choose to be a father in the United States, you're going to be a father with one wife who's totally devoted to his wife and has to suppress his natural male urges and hide those to the best of his ability from his wife because she's conditioned to have a one-woman, one-man relationship. So any news of anything else means that this gauge is culturally, socially, and family controlled. So once you fall out of the middle line of the socio-cultural archetypical belief system, you run headlong into trouble because now you don't fit into the box. Some people feel better and more natural here in this box category. But people like me feel like I'm dying a slow death. I'm being suffocated. I'm being choked. I'm being put in a situation that's not only completely unnatural for me, but does not make sense to me. Not all of us, shall we say, are from here. That's a deep one. Meditate on that. Some of us are here, but we're not from here. Okay, so now this is the path that I'm on, which we'll call the left-hand path only because it's on your left-hand side, and that's the novel individual. That is the hero's journey. The hero's journey is what it is because you have to go out and be different than this collective. You're breaking the framework in some way. When you go on the hero's journey, as sure as I'm standing here as an adult male with a bald head, you are going to run into the trials of being different. You are, as Osho says, freedom is the most dangerous thing you'll ever experience. Why? Misery loves company. If you're having too much fun, too much sex, making too much money, you're too beautiful, you're too strong, you're too fat, all of that, you got to fit in the box. In Australia, they have a saying called the tall poppy syndrome. The Australian culture has traditionally downplayed and suppressed the growth and development of superstars because there is still an underlying, shall we say, cultural box that they're acting out over there. Now, this path, the hero's journey, takes you through some steps. Many of the people I coach with life challenges and health challenges are actually on the hero's journey, don't realize what's going on, and most of their illness, pain, and disease comes from their own judgments of themselves, not realizing that as a child, their unconscious was programmed by family, society, and culture. So if all of a sudden you want to have sex with multiple women, or you want to have two wives, you run headlong into friction and tension, and what will your mom think? What will your dad think? What will the church think? What will the people at work think? So your ego's unconscious, which is expressing the collective, becomes your first real trial. You have to deal with the judge inside of you, and that's what shamanic healing is all about. That's what real healing is all about, is identifying, is that voice actually your own? Or is it mom's, dad's, and somebody else? And often you find that it's people that you don't really enjoy being around. So there's a real growth process happening, and the growth process is, quite simply, the child becoming an adult. You can be an adult in the box, you can be an adult out of the box. You can be a child in the box, you can be a child out of the box. You can be completely out of control out of the box, and you can be in control out of the box. Personally, I like to be in the middle. I'm out of control sometimes, and I'm in control. And when I'm out of control, it's because I choose to be out of control because I need the irrational as, shall we say, a balancing medicine for all the rational I have to deal with to work in this social cultural environment. The artist is suppressed by the scientist, and the scientist often comes into conflict with the artist inside themselves. All you got to do is look at all the interpretations of the quantum enigma, and you see every variation on the theme, from denial to acceptance to imaginatory explanations, okay? Which is the state of all human beings. So this basically then gives you the two paths. Now if you go on this path and you find yourself not enjoying your family's ideals, not enjoying your society's ideals, feeling like you're in the wrong country with the wrong people at the wrong time, you're just getting a message from the inside that that's not where you're supposed to be in this lifetime. And the longer you stay there, the sicker you're going to get, the fatter you might get, or the skinnier you might get, but you're going to have problems, most of which will be medicated by doctors, none of which is likely to do anything for you except stir up your body-mind relationships for all the reasons I've shared on 1,000 blogs before. Okay, now, the hero's journey begins here. First, you have to depart. You've got to get out of the box. Family, society, culture, church, whatever. Then you go into initiation. Once you go into initiation, you are now entering into a new world. So, as an example, you take on a second wife. As soon as people find out, trust me, you're going to be in a new world. You're going to be in a new world when you take on your second wife. But once people find out, you're going to know you're in a new world. A good example here is something very simple. When I first started developing the concept of using Swiss ball exercises for conditioning athletes and mixing it with weights and gyms and modalities, people reacted very negatively at large. I got criticized. You wouldn't believe the stuff people said about me. And I didn't care, because one of the things about the novel individual is when they're balanced, they have confidence in themselves, because usually people that come out of here have a strong sense there's something out of balance here, and they've got to disconnect themselves from the problem so they can look at it to contribute to it. Most of your great thinkers and inventors are out here. As Carl Jung says, the average person cannot be successful. This is the home of the average person. As a metaphor, this is the home of those who we call successful in our culture, the Einsteins, the Martin Luther Kings, the Malcolm X's, the Gandhis, Mother Teresa, Yogananda, whoever you want to throw in there. They're over here typically. They go in here to help, but you can't really go too far past this if you're in there, because the tall poppy syndrome says, you're getting too smart, you're getting too fast, you're getting too beautiful. Okay? So we depart, we go into a new world, we have trials. Okay? When we run into these trials, that's the stuff that is transformative. The warrior's not a warrior if he just watches boxing and kickboxing as a metaphor, or if he just looks at battles on television, or plays video games. That's mental masturbation, is what I call that. Once you go into your trials, you're going to run into things that are going to challenge you. A lot. Once you go on to departure, you typically need to find a mentor when you get into the trials, which is what I do for people. Lots of them. Most people cannot make it through the trials without a mentor. Why? Because no matter what age you are, if you're embarking in the adventure of a new archetype, you are a child again. No matter what age you are, if you're 72 years old and you go take a piano lessons for the first time, and you're not a musician, you've just now entered into the musician archetype, and you're a child, so you need a mentor. Otherwise, you may have so much frustration and disappointment in yourself and self-judgment. Your mentor is there to help you determine what is a worthy judgment or what isn't a worthy judgment, which means you have to choose your mentor wisely. And oftentimes the mentor needs to choose you. Lots of people want me to be their mentor, but I can smell when they're ready for what I'm about to take them through, and I don't have time to fart around with people that are still such children that they can't even acknowledge wisdom. Okay? Once you enter into the trial stage, you end up having to go into what Joseph Campbell refers to as the innermost cave, the sanctum of yourself, somewhere to reintegrate yourself and figure out, who are you now? This is that process of shedding the skin. The snake sheds its skin to become something new, and the trials are where you peel the skin off, but the innermost cave is where you go to heal and get clear on your affirmation of who you really are. And when you come out of the innermost cave, you're reborn as a man, as a warrior, as a lover, as a mother, etc. Then you return and reintegrate. So this person now returns back to help others overcome the imbalances, pains of either being in the box because they want to be there, which is fine, or the problems of being in the box and being afraid to get out of the box. Either one. Okay, so these are very, very important concepts. So now we come to a very important conclusion. Once you know your archetype, here I'm going to use the warrior archetype. Once you know your archetype, if you want to take the Zen path, David Suzuki gives the interpretation of Zen meaning the most efficient way, which I really think is good. That's what that means, the most efficient way, or spirit, but it also means the middle path. The warrior archetype here, all of us are in life. To have an archetypical experience, you've got to be in life as a general theme. The warrior then has got to look at what are the 4 essential categories of values by which we all must live, because without these 4 categories of values, we are dangerously imbalanced, and you can be a master at 3 and get a disease from the absence of 1, and I can assure you that after 31 years of coaching people. So the warrior then, here you see my circle. The circle represents the warrior that's whole. The sphere is a symbol of wholeness, within which you see his bow, and he's drawing an arrow. The warrior has to have adequate rest. The warrior has to have adequate movement of the right times, of the right types. Movement is movement of body, movement of emotions, and movement of mind. You can't be a warrior if you've got a great body, but you're emotionally unstable and mentally unstable. You can't be mentally unstable if you're emotionally unstable. And if your biology is out of balance, you can't be mentally or emotionally stable. So these are very, very critical things. Dr. Movement deals with all that moves, from thought to matter. Dr. Quiet means whatever you're moving has to come to a rest state because it's the natural state of the universe, 0. Okay? So we must extract our potential from the rest state. It is the authentic state of everything, shall we say, behind the universe, or consciousness. If consciousness was moving, we wouldn't be able to perceive our own perceptions of movement. Okay? Dr. Happy means, who am I? What is my dream? What is my definition of a warrior? What am I becoming each day? What is the direction I'm taking in my life? How am I differentiating myself from other people? Remember, the function of any archetype is to allow you to reach wholeness through individuation. So as an example, if we take a circle, which means wholeness, we can divide that circle in as many ways as you can conceive possible. You can slice that pie, so you can call that whatever you want: the teacher, the lover, the warrior, the victim, the musician, the scientist, whatever you want. Any one of those paths emanates from the center to reach the whole, and emanates from the whole to reach the center. So if we just think of this as a bicycle wheel, the soul is like the axle. It doesn't do anything. It just sits there. But the wheel moves around it through life. So it's aware of all the experiences that are happening because it's actually the center of it all. So consciousness becomes conscious of. We can make it to enlightenment, but the key point I'm making is that each spoke is an individuation. You could name the spokes: Paul, Vidya, Johnny, Susie, Billy, Janet, Jack, whatever you want. And we might actually think we're individuals, but the reality of it is we're all part of this wheel of life called the collective whole, which exists within the world. The world is the wheel in our sphere of reality. So any path is a good path if you are aware of what your opportunity is on any one of those paths. So Dr. Happy establishes values that signify what happiness means. Arnold Patton beautifully says, you cannot live life in ideal terms until you can conceive of it that way. You cannot live life in ideal terms until you can conceive of it that way. Dr. Happiness is a place or a philosophical disposition by which you conceive of what you are and choose to be, and you establish values so that your choices are reflective of your dream. This means you're making choices that are not reflective of the potential of your dream. The father who goes out and drinks at night instead of coming home to help kids with homework and play, or who works excessively, is not really clear about what it means to be a father, and the pain that results will bring him back into the reality of being a father, and you can't choose not to be a father once you become a father. You can only choose to be a better one or a less effective one, and the better you are as a father, the more balanced you are, the more you realize the beauty, the good, the truth of life itself, because it surrounds you. If you're over here, you're not surrounded, you're on the edge. When you're in the middle, you can experience everything much more efficiently because you're central to the theme of the Father. Dr. Diet means, in quantum physics, if we just use the concept of the wave function or unconditional love as all potential, Dr. Diet is what the arrow Dr. Happy shoots at. That means, what do I eat? Remember, the physical body feeds on food. So what are you shooting? If you go to the store and eat a piece of cow from a commercial farm, you just shot a cow. We like to pretend we didn't shoot it. That's just another little game that shows you how many children we have on the planet. We just think it's like a part we buy off the store, but you've just chosen a cow, you've shot the divine arrow at it, and you've collapsed the possibilities. You've taken out free range organic, you've taken out all possibilities except what it is that your arrow hits. So just like Feynman showed in quantum electrodynamics, a photon takes every possible path at once and chooses the one that is most efficient. We choose the one we think is most efficient, but we're often choosing with our ego and often from the negative elements of the unconscious. So you need values for quiet, values for diet, values for movement, values for happiness, and without those values, you're going to vacillate all over the place. That will produce pain, sadness, and often causes people to give up. In our next presentation, part 4, we will discuss myth. See you there.